The views expressed on the Final Straw Radio do not necessarily reflect those of Asheville FM, Friends of Community Radio, or any of the affiliate radio stations airing the show.
The Final Straw is a weekly anarchist radio show. It's fucking awesome, and you're never going to hear me say fucking awesome on our show because we're FCC regulated.
There's a black part of my heart that just flutters when you talk like that.
Talk, then more yelling.
It's a weird sort of like nice thing in a way, but also can get kind of crushing at times.
thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org.
From the studios of WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, and I'm Burst of Goodness. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment, you're free to do so. Just send us an email and let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events on their website, firestorm.coop.
This week I got to speak to two people about the anti-KKK demo in Charlottesville, Virginia on July 8th, plus about the resistance to a Unite the Right gathering proposed for Charlottesville on August 12th. We speak about what went down on J8, plus things to keep in mind for A12 and who all may be attending the event. Here is some intro text from our guests that lays the groundwork for some of the things we will speak about. Quote, in the wake of the Charleston Massacre in 2015, the Confederate flag saw a drastic change in social tolerance, and its removal from public institutions sparked widespread reaction from scores of white Southerners, even leading to further terrorizing and violence. Donald Trump's campaign and election saw these fires stoked further, now emboldening the more explicit white supremacist dialogue that so many had attempted to distance the flag from a year earlier. In late April of 2017, the City Council of Charlottesville, Virginia, voted to remove its statues depicting Confederate Generals Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and rename the downtown parks that hosted them as Justice Park and Emancipation Park, respectively. Local Confederate advocates such as the Virginia Flaggers and politicians like Corey Stewart had already inserted themselves into the dialogue, but they did not stop when the city's decision was cast. With the assistance of local white activists, a court injunction was filed to challenge and halt the removals, and only a few weeks later, white power figureheads from across the U.S. descended on Charlottesville's parks unannounced for a day of rallies and photo ops in a calculated move to insert themselves into the conflict. Since May, the people of Charlottesville had been dogged by intermittent rallies, harassment, stalking, threats, and outright violence from these forces, all the while fighting to resist this fascist creep. Just 2 weeks ago, on July 8th, the infamous Loyal White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan held a rally in Justice Park. Many from the city and across Virginia assembled for a peaceful counter-demonstration that sought to block the Klan from entering the park. This time, the police led a violent and one-sided escalation against those protesting white supremacy that included 23 arrests. As the far-right and so-called alt-right's campaign in Charlottesville continues, August 12th has been set for what they hope to be a culminating event, a rally to, quote, unite the right, end quote, in Emancipation Park. With a special guest lineup featuring the worst of the worst, they are counting on even greater numbers of alt-righters, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, neo-Confederates, militia groups, and even biker gangs to converge from all corners of the country, with aims not only of unification but of violent retribution against those who oppose them. A call to action for A12 resistance and detailed information by chronicling this struggle, including how to support those arrested on July 8th, can be found at solidaritycville.com. And you can contact defend.cville@protonmail.com for more information. Use the hashtag DefendCVILLE and hashtag the new KKK for news and conversation before, during, and after 8/12. And most importantly, show up to support Charlottesville and help send these Nazis packing, end quote. I apologize for the quality of the audio, which is a little bit rough in this interview. It was a technical situation that could not have been avoided, but hopefully it won't be too much of a barrier. Next week on The Final Straw, stay tuned for an interview that I did with Margaret Killjoy about her new novella, The Lamb Will Slaughter the Lion, which is set to release on August 15th from Tor.com. Would you sort of describe the book for listeners in your own words?
In my own words is funny because this is the first time someone else has written the copy for my books, you know, the back cover and the thing that appears on Amazon and such. And so I was like, what, I don't get to call it a drop kick in the mouth punk fantasy?
Keep an ear out for a special podcast segment we'll release this week about Radio 98 FM, radio zones of subversive expression in Athens, Greece. This is the squatted pirate radio station that we were going on and on about during the interview on It's Going Down. Well, as you may have heard on Bad News, Angry Voices from Around the World #2 last week, they've been having some issues with the telecommunication ministry, the police, a commercial pirate station, and the university where they squat. So we chatted about it for about 45 minutes, and they tell us about what's going on in Greece these days. Take a peek at our website midweek for this interview. Now a few quick announcements from the dungeons of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Comrades incarcerated in the ADSEG, that is solitary confinement, block at the Eastham unit in Texas are reporting that mentally ill prisoners who are unable to care for their own physical health and hygiene are being utterly neglected by prison COs, and even by mental health personnel supposedly tasked with the oversight functions at the prison. Comrade Cato, who is an occupant of the ADSEG unit and has seen this neglect firsthand, related in a recent communication that his concern for one particular individual on the block has become acute. He writes, quote, "It is known that the man is mentally ill. If engaged directly in conversation, he is able to respond, although only in very short sentences. He knows he's from Nebraska, and that he is here for, quote, trespassing too much, unquote. When asked why he's in solitary, he states, quote, they want me to do work and it's too hard, unquote, or that the guards are yelling all the time and I get upset, unquote. Each time Comrade Cato tried to engage prison staff about getting some assistance for this man who had been living for months in his own filth in a roach-infested cell, he was ignored or told that he can't advocate for fellow inmates. Well-known prison activist and human rights advocate Comrade Malik Washington, who also resides in this unit, similarly tried to speak out on behalf of this person, and he too was promptly told to mind his own business. A major concern is that this man could become ill from the deadly heat people in Texas prisons are regularly exposed to. And this is a concern for all Texas prisoners, but especially those who no longer, or maybe never did, possess the cognitive ability to advocate for themselves. As Comrade Malik writes, quote, this man lives only 3 cells away from me. He has no fan, and he really doesn't know or understand how to ask for one, so he suffers more than the normal prisoners in ADSEG. And yet, from the senior warden all the way down to the lowest-ranking correctional officers, no one sees the importance or urgency of obtaining a fan for this mentally ill human being, unquote. Officials in Eastham will not succeed in destroying solidarity amongst imprisoned people. Comrades Cato and Malik will continue speaking out for their fellow incarcerated brothers and sisters, and they need your help. You can take a minute to call Brian Collier, Executive Director of Texas Department of Criminal Justice, at 512-463-9988. That's 512-463-9988. In order to tell him that mentally ill prisoners need to be properly cared for. And if you want to learn more about this pressure campaign and about prisoner advocacy, you can write to Comrade Cato at Noah Coffin, that's Coffin, number 179-5167, Eastham Unit, that's East Ham Unit, 2665 Prison Road number 1, Lovelady, Texas, 75851. And thanks to Disembodied Voice for getting us that audio. This is the week of solidarity with the over 200 people arrested during the protests against the inauguration of Donald J. Trump on January 20th, also known as the J20 defendants. Among the ways to get involved, one could throw a fundraiser, attend a fundraiser, do graffiti, drop a banner, have an info session to teach people about it, re-socialize your local Fox News outlet and read a statement on the air. You could plaster your social media. You could talk to that awkward manarchist Uncle Jerry, and otherwise raise awareness that might support the lawyers in their attempt on July 27th to get charges against the J20 defendants dismissed. More info on events ongoing can be found at defendj20resistance.org. If you're in New York and you want to have some pizza about this, the New York City General Defense Committee of the Industrial Workers of the World, or NYC-GDC of IWW, is organizing a pizza dinner as a benefit for the over 200 people arrested in D.C. on that fateful day. You can check out the Facebook event that's attached to the NYC-GDC of the IWW for sharing or donations. There's also a crowd rise that you can donate to. That's GDC-bail-fund-for-J20. And it is going to be happening on Saturday, August 5th from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. at Rebecca's at 610 Bushwick Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, 11206. And now an announcement from the FireInside.noblogs.org blog. The Fire Inside zine goes in-depth with organizing strategy and tactics, identifies successes and shortcomings, and aims to establish a through line between this peak of prisoner resistance and future efforts that will surely exceed it. This August, we're expecting another large mobilization. Jailhouse Lawyers Speak and other inside-outside networks have called for a Millions for Prisoners march. Unlike the September 9th call, August 19th focuses on marches and rallies on the outside rather than inside actions. The biggest challenge of prisoner organizing is communication, particularly about support levels. Demonstrations of robust outside support, like those being called for on August 19th, are opportunities to show prisoners that they do not act alone, which helps their expectations and confidence that they are not acting alone. Prisoners' voices and perspectives are essential to radical organizing against prison. We must influence the narrative around high-profile prisoner activities, whether they be revolts or sit-down strikes. The Fire Inside zine includes contributions from 25 prisoners and 3 solidarity organizations. It is available for download online at incarceratedworkers.com and fireinside.noblogs.org, where you can also find a list of tour dates and speaking events between Denver and Massachusetts. These events will include call-ins from prisoner participants in the September 9th actions and a strong focus on the organizing needs of local groups. Tuesday, July 25th, marks the 3rd annual International Day of Solidarity with Anti-Fascist Prisoners, in the aftermath of the fiery protests against the G20 and the arrests of hundreds of comrades. We were again reminded that the embers of direct action need long-term prisoner support in order to keep the flames of resistance strong. Some 40 G20 protesters remain in prison in Hamburg and need our solidarity. Since the beginning of 2017, scores of anti-fascists and other revolutionaries have been arrested, and the numbers keep growing. In Belarus and the United States alone, several hundred anti-fascists and anarchists have been arrested for taking part in anti-government and anti-fascist demonstrations. Just this month in Belarus, Vadim Boyko was arrested and transferred to a penal colony for a 2014 fight against right-wing hooligans. While in the U.S., over 20 people were arrested in Charlottesville, Virginia for defending the city against the KKK, and 3 people were arrested for participating in violent demonstrations against fascists in Sacramento last year. One person, Mike Williams, who we'll hear more about in just a moment, is a Native American organizer with the Brown Berets and is currently being held in jail with a $500,000 bail. There's something powerful in a worldwide day of solidarity, and there's still time to do something for July 25th, to show support for comrades who are behind prison walls, as well as those tangled in the legal process which seeks to separate them from us in the same way. Any action, no matter how small, such as a solidarity photo or a letter, is meaningful and appreciated. We've heard from Antifa prisoners that the letters and postcards that they've received from around the world has made them feel less alone and helped them through the darkness of prison. You can visit nycantifa.wordpress.com/global-solidarity Antifa-prisoner-list for a list of names and current addresses. Another way to show solidarity is to donate money. A group that's recommended by this IGD post is the bpra.info/en. It's the Bulgarian Prisoner Association, started by anti-fascist prisoner Jock Palfreeman, an Australian man serving a 20-year sentence in Bulgaria for defending two Romani men against an attack by fascist football hooligans. Jock has specifically asked supporters to donate to the association, which helps Bulgarian prisoners fight against the corrupt Bulgarian prison system and the violations and abuses they endure, for July 25th. Another good place to donate is Antifa International's International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund, which can be found at INTL Antifa Defense, that's defense with a C, .wordpress.com/donate. The fund raises money for prisoners as well as money for legal defense, medical costs, and family expenses for anti-fascists. However, there are many prisoners and defendants, local and international, who need support, and we encourage you to donate to those of your choosing. It's also encouraged to do solidarity actions. You can show support through banner drops, literature distribution on the streets, solidarity statements, benefit concerts, conversations with that awkward manarchist Uncle Jerry, letter writing, solidarity photos, and other more creative ways. There's also currently a week of solidarity with the hundreds of anti-fascist protesters arrested during the anti-Trump protests at the U.S. inauguration on J20. So it's suggested that you might tweet your solidarity with hashtag or #, depending on your generation, J25Antifa, hashtag, #. And remember, until all are free, no pasaran. Free Roman Bagdan, free Vlad Lenko, free Vadim Boyko, free Dmitry Styashenka, free Jock Palfreeman, free Alexander Kolchenko, free Joel Almgren, free Mike Williams, drop the charges. And this is finally from It's Going Down, about Mike Williams. Longtime Sacramento activist and indigenous elder Mike Williams is one of 3 people of color who face charges stemming from the anti-fascist mobilizations to shut down a neo-Nazi rally in June 2016. Only one neo-Nazi, William Planer, is facing charges, and he was only arrested after vandalizing a synagogue in Denver, Colorado. Mike is currently facing massive charges and a high bail. It's requested that you support him by going to fundedjustice.com/free Mike Williams. And share that link far and wide, along with the article that's up on IGD, which we're linking in our blog, to raise awareness about his case. Here's the deets. On June 26th, hundreds of people from across Northern California and beyond mobilized and converged to protest against a rally called for by the Traditionalist Workers' Party, TWP, and the Golden State Skinheads, GSS. Both organizations are open neo-Nazi groups, and on that day proudly displayed their shields carrying SS logos along with swastika tattoos. In the ensuing clashes, several people were stabbed and some almost lost their lives, as the fascists yelled out racial slurs during the attack. As the neo-Nazis fled, they also dropped a handgun, and another was seen in the waistband of one of the attackers. Clearly, these people came ready to injure, attack, and potentially kill. Those that had the courage to stand up to them deserve our complete support, especially in the face of such harsh and cruel charges from the state. The TWP and GSS are linked to neo-Nazis and the KKK groups across the U.S., and the TWP and GSS are connected to a string of vandalisms, assaults, and violent crimes. For instance, William Planer, the only person from the neo-Nazi side who has been taken into custody on charges stemming from that protest, was actually arrested in Denver after he vandalized a synagogue, as I mentioned a minute ago. In the past few months, Planer has also attended a variety of pro-Trump and alt-right rallies, wearing a t-shirt which reads, quote, "proud to be a fascist," unquote. Planer is no stranger to being arrested and has a long and violent history. While TWP leaders have attempted to portray Planer as a, quote, blue-collar patriot, unquote, like the other members of GSS and the TWP, Planer is clearly a violent threat to whatever community he comes into contact with. Shortly after Planer was arrested, Nathan Lowry, a.k.a. Leroy Jenkins, one of the leaders of the GSS, was picked up by police on weapons charges, however received no charges springing from the Sacramento stabbings. Another violent member of the GSS who has long been identified by local activists, Derek Ryan Puneo, the neo-Nazi skinhead who was photographed in numerous instances stabbing people and also holding a bloody knife, still has yet to face charges. Several months after the rally, Puneo, who has a long history of arrest, violent attacks, and attempted rape, was sent back to prison after assaulting his then-girlfriend, also involved in neo-Nazi activism. Both Lowry and Puneo are a clear example of neo-Nazi groups like the TWP being filled with violent and sadistic people who are a danger to the community and those around them. Those who stood up to the TWP and the GSS did so because they saw a clear threat that these people represent to our community. Unlike many of those within the alt-right, the Golden State skinheads cannot hide behind their fancy haircuts and memes. We see these people for what they are, a violent and dangerous cancer that produces violence, assault, and racist intimidation. Drawing a line in the sand against them is not an attack on free speech, but instead a defensive act to preserve basic freedoms for all and keep our cities and towns free of their Hitler-worshipping garbage.
First, here are some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We're caught like a
On July 18th, Hamilton County, Ohio prosecutor Joe Dieters announced that his office would not pursue a third trial of former University of Cincinnati police officer Ray Tenzing. Tenzing pulled over Sam DuBose in what has been characterized as a routine traffic stop. Tenzing was white. Sam DuBose was black. Tenzing, a white officer, shot DuBose, a black man, in the head during this routine traffic stop. By the way, the T-shirt that Tenzing wore that day when he shot Sam DuBose in the head had a Confederate flag on it. The key evidence in the case was Tenzing's own body cam footage that showed Tenzing reaching into DuBose's vehicle, and after what appeared to be a momentary struggle, Tenzing then drew his weapon and shot DuBose in the head. The Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office tried Tenzing on charges of murder and manslaughter. A mistrial was declared when the jury, composed of 12 morons too stupid to get out of jury duty, could not reach a verdict. So the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office opted to try Ray Tenzing again. Again, 12 idiots too stupid to get out of jury duty announced they could not reach a verdict, and the court declared a mistrial. So, just in case you missed what I said before, let me repeat. A white fascist pig wearing a Confederate flag T-shirt under his uniform shot a black man in the head during a routine traffic stop, and the whole event was caught on body cam, and he's getting off scot-free. The prosecutor's office will not seek a third trial because they cannot seem to get a conviction with such flimsy evidence as video footage of the event. As of now, there are no cop cars burning in the streets of Cincinnati. The Hamilton County Courthouse is not a smoldering pile of rubble. It seems to me that the decision not to prosecute for a third trial is based upon the assessment that a riot wouldn't happen. And it didn't. So don't be surprised when Cincinnati area pigs kill more unarmed black men. Cincinnati gave them permission. So, some observations. First, let's recall the big push for body cams. Everyone became convinced that if we equip the racist pigs with body cams, they'll stop massacring black people with reckless abandon. Of course, the body cam initiative came about after dash cams didn't stop the racist pigs. It had no effect on the massacre. There was dash cam video footage of a Cleveland pig jumping on the hood of a car and firing into two unarmed people of color in the car. Pigs fired 137 shots. But body cams would succeed where dash cams failed, right? Apparently not. I have to wonder what the hell else we can put cameras on. It would seem that, at some point, the reformist pacifists who continue seeking solutions that have never worked as solutions will end up endorsing the placement of cameras on cameras. You know, because the reformist approaches to police violence, like protesting peacefully and mandating more cameras, will suddenly work, even though they never have. I would suggest that if murderous pigs had their homes burned to the ground on something of a regular basis, other murderous pigs who would otherwise reach for a gun in any other given situation will instead say, I don't fear courts, but I really don't want my house torched, so maybe I should holster this thing. It goes back to operant conditioning. Pavlov trained dogs with negative reinforcement. I'm sure we can train pigs the same way. It just might take longer because dogs are smarter. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain for War and Corruption in Lebanon, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at Sean Swain 243-205 Warren CI P.O. Box 120 5787 State Route 63 Lebanon, Ohio 45036. Updates on his situation and more writings by Sean can be found at seanswain.org. All right, I'm here speaking with two people about what happened in Charlottesville recently and about the August 12th date of resistance. First of all, would you all talk about the resistance that happened in Charlottesville a couple weeks ago and talk about what folks were protesting that day?
So I can speak to the resistance side from a couple of the groups that organized for nonviolent threat action, but also from people who were planning to obstruct the arrival of the KKK and were out. I think, folks gathered to the numbers around about 1,000 for a show of about 40 KKK members total, including like their publicists and whatnot. Plenty of press and folks that gathered in the park that morning because the permit was supposed to start at 4. So there were people out there who were playing music. People came out pretty early in the park to hold the space, to communicate to the KKK and state, this is a public space. We are holding it because we, of course, wanted the permit to be revoked ahead of time. But the city was insistent that they had to offer the permit because of court costs for refusing to these people their First Amendment rights. And so they held the park. Of course, a couple of people who were wearing Confederate flags came into the park early on, and people who were holding the park in protest, shouted them down, tried to get them to leave the park. We did a pretty early on sweep of the park in the park area, and before the KKK arrived, the police had dogs and riot gear and MARPs out and a helicopter and drones before the KKK even arrived and before they were really anything other than peaceful protest. So the show of military force started early, and around 4 o'clock, the KKK proceeded to enter into the park. I think some protesters attempted to stand and lay on the ground in front of where they were trying to come in and were arrested at that point. And then as well as, they marched in, they had their rally. Of course, the protesters in the park, shouted at them and tried to, prevent them from giving their speech. And they gave their speech and, stood there and raised signs of hate and, banners that had said things and kind of like antagonized the crowd with white power shouts and things like that. So that happened up until, I believe they were only out there for about an hour, 10 minutes. And, but it was beyond the permit time frame because I believe the permit did end at 5 or 5:30. And then the police ushered them out under heavy guard, and they went back into the place, and then were ushered to the garage area they had parked. Also, next to where the garage area, there were 2 UVA buses that were used to shuttle, or that were supposed to be used to shuttle people who were arrested. So, with this show, of course, I'm assuming that state police and other people who come in were expecting a clash or expecting, there to be something other than people protesting. And so people stood along right on a sidewalk where the cops gave the KKK usher out of a garage downtown. They had, I've heard different stories that they rented it or it was a private business. There are conflicting stories, but they were ushered out of that garage. People attempted to block the garage, but were ushered to the sidewalk where the cops walked them out, and then I think the cops all walked back to the station downtown, and out in front of the station, you know, people were mulling around, and some people were cleaning up the park, and people began, once kind of like the white liberal and like more of the populace moved out, the police started to clash with people who were downtown left, and people were down there like peacefully protesting. I personally was, a friend of mine had gotten grabbed and was like helping a friend who was having kind of a medical situation right next to where they threw the first pepper spray bomb, and, you know, from there it kind of escalated into other people getting grabbed, them throwing a total of 3 pepper spraying detainees, just a show of force that was unwarranted and unnecessary. So I feel like that's like I can pause because I feel like that's a kind of good, you know, kind of time frame of what occurred, and other people can fill in as needed, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Does the other person have something to add to that?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that is pretty significant about this is that this is a chapter of the KKK that is kind of notorious. They often kind of like call these rallies in a very like disorganized manner, kind of just drum up, you know, a lot of fervor and opposition. And it, you know, there is a talking point among, you know, the more liberal left and those elements of sort of, you know, ignore them because they're not to be taken seriously. And that was certainly a message that Charlottesville town government was trying to convey to people who were, you know, considering going out and protesting. But the reality is that, you know, they're led by an FBI informant that, you know, not that recently in their last nationally displayed rally, the same day he ordered one of his generals to stab another of his generals. And so he's currently up on charges of abetting attempted murder. Before that, they held a riot held a rally in Columbia that turned into a riot in 2015. So they don't have a good track record to start with, and they're never able to like muster all that many people. And like was mentioned before, they often devolve into this scenario where they're sort of just flicking people off and waving the flag and Sieg Heiling, and it all just falls apart. But what often happens is that they do have an extreme amount of police protection. And so the conflict is often offset onto the police, which is definitely what we saw happen that day. But I think there were a number of people, you know, who came out just because it was the KKK, and there's a number of people who came out and recognizing exactly what element of the Klan was showing up that day. But regardless, they were completely outshined. I mean, they actually managed to have a sound system this time, which is impressive for them. But nonetheless, they couldn't be heard. They could hardly be seen. And there was just too much going on for them to be relevant. And, you know, they had to start the rally late because of the actions of folks who got there early and were setting up, you know, blockades with their bodies. That's part of why the rally went over time, is because it really started like 45 minutes late, and apparently the police just didn't know how to get them into the park, which was, you know, pretty awesome thing to see, because a lot of this was, you know, a sort of like ad hoc coalition that showed up that day.
Gotcha. How the first person mentioned this, but how many of the Klan were there, would you say?
Like 45-ish.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And to like 1,000 protesters?
Yeah.
Wow.
What would you
Yeah,
say?
a lot of people.
I say 1,000.
A lot of people have said 1,000. I've also seen reports of like closer to 2,000 or more. It was hard to tell because everything was so distributed in like a 4-block radius.
I was surprised, and I like somehow missed this from reading report backs, but when the first person was talking about how there were a bunch of police vehicles and drones and stuff like that before the Klan even got there. Did this like surprise any of the people who were resisting the Klan, or was this like to be expected?
I mean, I certainly talked to a number of folks that did not expect this. I think that it's not necessarily in Charlottesville's, realm of experience or the realm of practice for Charlottesville police to deploy in the way that they do, or they did that day. And I think that the people who were expecting it are the same people who are kind of like maybe showing up because they know more about this Klan chapter. Like I said, is that it's not necessarily folks who are kind of like hearing the KKK is coming to town and going to go check something out, but more people maybe who are like engaged in resistance already, or like tracking these groups, showing up to demos and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well.
I guess one thing that was significant is that so it's kind of similar to actually the rally that they had in Columbia in 2015, which was also in July. Actually, it was held 1 month after the Charleston Massacre. So what happened that day was that they had to pull a lot of different agencies together in order to have enough officers and be able to control and restore public order. So in Charlottesville recently, on July 8th, there were 7 different agencies working together, and they kind of have different areas that they'll be assigned to depending on their level of familiarity or whatever department they're working. But Virginia State Police, were heavily deployed, and that certainly was the most aggressive force, and also seemed to be the least prepared. And in any situation where you're going to be having a bunch of different law enforcement agencies working together, and whether they're saying they're trying to protect people or whatever, they're anticipating a riot, whatever their line may be, the reality is that their ability to communicate and coordinate breaks down as they add each new group. And we saw a lot of that going on. There's a lot of confusion for all of the toys and gear that they could bring out. They didn't really necessarily know how to use them or interact with each other with these tools, in ways that they might have been deploying tear gas grenades that they're not reading the wind, and it's making the media and medics and other people choke instead of the people they're trying to directly disperse. Some people have even said that, beyond the confusion and the shouting and the conflicting orders that they received from police, that they've watched a couple officers who were in riot gear just break down crying.
Holy shit. I'm not going to feel too sad about that personally, but that's it's so interesting to dissect these kind of protests and analyze the police reaction, because so often I hear reports of people being oh yeah, the police really weren't equipped to handle the amount of people that were there. The people totally overwhelmed the cops. We saw this in DC, we saw this in Germany, which is an entirely different cultural context, and seems like we saw that in Charlottesville. So that's a really important sort of lesson to take away from this too, is numbers are really, really important.
And I think it's really interesting that when the other person just talked about the gap in communication with the narrative that the cops and the CPD issued after around them being pepper sprayed by protesters, right? And so, of course, we watched them after from a million angles and realized that what happened was one of a member of the protest was being arrested, and the police discharged pepper spray on them, and the cops shouted pepper spray, and then all the other cops started shouting there's pepper spray discharged, and then we heard shouts of pepper spray, right? but then the official CPD was like, the cops were sprayed with pepper spray. And then we were like, there is no actual incident of a discharge of pepper spray on any of the film except for you. And then how that got sent to the mayor and was then, put up and got picked up by the New York Times and placed the seed of, like, of course, in the comments that people being like, they deserved it, they're pepper spraying the cops, right? And us spending so much energy after in a press conference and, like a couple of people watching film and, like, writing press releases, really kind of pulling that back. And how that, and like some people might say that communication piece was intentional. Those intentional tactics to gaslight and, frame the protest in this light. But some people would say that might have been an issue with communication in between, interagency.
How has it been to tangle with media after this? If you know any, the aftermath.
I mean, I feel like we have some good coverage. And some coverage. And I think we got a little bit more support this time because when the police discharged the pepper spray the first time, there was a reporter and her team had just arrived to the scene. And so they got accidentally caught up in that. And I think the way that we were able to frame and control kind of like the responses and the narrative seemed positive. And we've had like good sources like in interactions with media personnel who are willing to come out and listen and, use specific language when talking about what's going on.
For sure. That's awesome. I heard that there were 23 people arrested on July 8th, and I heard that they were all opposing the KKK. Is there a support page or any asks for the people who were arrested and anything that they need that you're aware of?
I know there are a couple of support pages, and so I have it's a private page for a lot of reasons. But if people would like to get in contact, I can give you their contact information with the person who's doing the court support. Yeah, so we send out also a GoFundMe that was going around, or a Fundly, I believe, for raising money for, of course, like bail and court and going through the legal process. So both of those things are available.
Cool. And would people support, just search GoFundMe for Charlottesville?
I can, I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Oh,
it's
okay.
not going, it's a specific page, and they titled it something, but I know it's circulating widely right now.
Word.
And again, if they want to reach out to you, or if our other person knows, then they can shout it out.
Yeah, so I know that at least the one fundraiser that I have seen get a lot of traction and I know is public was actually launched by Anti-Fascists of the Seven Hills, which is actually a Richmond-based group. And Richmond's about 70 miles from Charlottesville, just down 64. And so they put up a Fundly page, and it's titled Virginia Anti-Racist Bail Fund, if you have trouble searching it. I think the link was a little glitchy at first, but it has been getting traction and support, and so that's really great to see, for sure.
That's awesome. So will you talk about Charlottesville on August 12th? What is happening on that day?
I can sort of provide some backstory, perhaps on like what started any of this coming to Charlottesville, and then maybe someone else can explain what's been going on in Charlottesville ahead of J8, and that's created sort of the A12 call. But essentially, there's a lot of different factions that are involved in this August 12th call for a Unite the Right rally, which is being hosted by a local white supremacist live streamer journalist. And
who we shall not name.
We need not give him any publicity.
Right.
But certainly, so there's a lot of different groups that we know inhabit the right and the far right and the alt-right, so-called. And so there has been a lot of factional infighting and disagreement, and this rally is sort of intended to, bring these forces together. Now, I think currently we can see from any sort of reports of Oath Keepers versus Proud Boys versus whatever, there is a lot of fighting still going on. So it may not turn out the best for them, but nonetheless, there was an alliance formed in Georgia in 2015, I believe. After it was the same day that in Stone Mountain, Georgia, the KKK was supposed to have a rally there, and then actually in Rome, Georgia, at the same time, there was an Aryan National Alliance that was conceived by a white supremacist meetup there. And that actually turned into the Nationalist Alliance, which incorporates a number of different, white power, neo-Nazi, alt-right groups. So that was sort of the basis of, this momentum forward for these groups to be working together that have traditionally not gotten along, not even had actual ideological agreement. They just, are also, they share white supremacist ideas, but put them into practice in a very different way. So that's led forward, and as the prominence of the alt-right grows, then it becomes, important for another right faction to either, join forces or, get out of the way. And certainly we've seen some criticisms, this term, the alt-light, that is applied to, say, the Proud Boys or Milo would be, they're not real enough. They're still sort of mainstream or quote cucked or whatever. They're not based. So, the Proud Boys also have shown up in Charlottesville, and I think that's something that someone else can speak to maybe a little bit more. But yeah, essentially these things have kind of been churning up for a couple years now, leading up to this greater, what they're considering to be a greater coalition.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that information. Did the other person have something to add to that?
No, that's perfect. That's an amazing synopsis. Yeah.
So you mentioned a bunch of stuff. Is the KKK going to come back to Charlottesville on August 12th? Or you said Unite the Right, and you mentioned the Proud Boys.
We have some intel that some KKK are supposed to be coming, but just dressed down. So we have some ideas about that and thoughts that might be the case, but not in full robe regalia.
That's really, really good to keep in mind. Would you talk about the Proud Boys for a second? What is their deal? And is there anything that people should keep in mind about them? Are they armed? Are they what's their deal? Do you know?
I'm gonna let you speak to that because go for it.
Okay. Well, I do want to say on the note of the Klan, the Proud Boys actually were one group that denounced the KKK rally and actually said that they were going to come out and protest it, but they didn't, as far as we saw. So there was, Richard Spencer also said that, he wasn't going to show up to this rally. He's been a figure, who has been stirring up all of this in Charlottesville and attaching himself to what was an ongoing struggle of removing Confederate monuments that are, in these parks where these white supremacist rallies have been happening. And, himself, along with Nathan D'Amigo of Identity Europa and Matt Heimbach of Traditionalist Workers Party, they've kind of been figureheads. They're on the speaker list, which, has some other high-profile sort of white supremacists, activists, lawyers, whatever they call themselves. But, yeah, they all kind of distance themselves with the KKK because it's not it doesn't present itself as a serious organization, and it doesn't have really any forward motion in the way that these other ranks seem to. And so there are certainly like common factions like Southern nationalists who are linking up for like the Unite the Right stuff, but not necessarily like Klan chapters are going to be invited. So, you know, if some do show up, I mean, maybe it'll just cause them to fight each other, hopefully, and that would be awesome. But the Proud Boys are actually a group that were initiated by Gavin McInnes, who's a former co-founder of Vice, turned conservative or ultra-conservative pundit. And essentially it's kind of a crossover of like skinhead culture and like hardcore and fraternity culture. It's like a brotherhood oriented organization dedicated to the proliferation of Western male chauvinism. Basically they, you know, walk around in black Fred Perry's with yellow striping is like the main part of their uniform, you know, often wearing like red MAGA hats, maybe rocking like Docs or something like that. It's like more the skinhead fashion. But yeah, they're pretty much just like a street level organization that, you know, they have a process of initiation that includes, you know, being jumped in by other members while listing off different types of cereal. It's all really goofy, and there's like several videos online. And the white supremacist person from Charlottesville who's securing a rally for that day actually got jumped in technically. I think it's like second-degree Proud Boy on film, and it was the most embarrassing thing ever. But they have looked a little bit different in different places, but in Charlottesville, you know, some sort of came in, and they came in at a point where there had already been a few rallies, including the Torchlit rally, that really stirred up a lot of national and international attention. And so a lot of like the people of Charlottesville were already aware of like these crazy things going on, and the businesses around the area where this is all taking place are along this sort of walking mall, the downtown mall in Charlottesville. And so it's a pretty important economic center. So many of the businesses, you know, have taken a position, you know, opposed to, at least not neutral to, you know, the Proud Boys or other white supremacist activity. And so essentially it ended up that their group is sort of like walking to a bar or restaurant to hang out and chat, and then the restaurant is promptly getting a call and then kicking them out. And then it goes on like that for hours, and I guess they were getting mad and kind of throwing fits in the street, and it was just, you know, a total mess. But certainly, like, they're not a group that alone presents themselves in any way that you want to take seriously. But when, you know, what they're essentially saying with August 12th is like, we're going to be part of this rally that's projected to draw 700 to 1,000 people with a violent far right agenda. You know, they're in a part of the equation for that, essentially like fighting force that's going to show up on Charlottesville's doorstep and try to intimidate and try to again insert themselves into a struggle that belongs to the people of Charlottesville, you know, over the removal of these Confederate monuments.
And I wanted to make sure that we can frame, like, people in the community members, especially members of organizations like APOC, have been for years clashing with this guy who is here in town here, who got the permit for this, and really has laid the community's groundwork for why those calls happen to restaurants when people see them on the downtown malls, right? Their tactics have been direct confrontation with him and the Proud Boys when they come into town and they try to reclaim the spaces. they have been actively teaching people to call or to shout them down or to, inform our community who was here. And we really want to honor them for some of the response that we're seeing on July the 8th and on August, because that's really important, and it feels important. And that's in direct contradiction to what we have coming from, public officials, which is always ignore or go somewhere else or let's talk about the absence of conflict as a space for peace.
Definitely, and thank you so much for saying that, because I feel like that happens so much, that the work that has been done before by like APOC communities, like you said, or by other marginalized communities get kind of silenced in times like these. And I think that honoring that and keeping that in our sights is really, really, really important.
Right.
And as like the other person was talking, I was thinking about like how the KKK is versus like all of these sort of newer groups like the Proud Boys, and maybe, the KKK doesn't really fit into this weird, modern kind of like Steve Bannon, disaffected young white man sort of ilk that like is becoming kind of popular right now. So that's like interesting for me to think about, and like think about the divisions between like what's going on now and sort of more establishment sort of fucking white supremacy like the KKK. So there is this like thing happening, the Unite the Right thing. What kind of support / participation are people asking for from both people who live in Charlottesville and from people who might be coming in from out of town?
I mean, I think that we are actively thinking through ways that people can offer support that are tiered and cognizant of their ability levels and risk assessments, right? So, of course, we need help for people coming in who are going to be protesting what is happening, who would like to be armed. We are asking for affinity groups for security. We're asking for training and things like that. We also have people who we need who can help those of us who want to do nonviolent direct action. And we are also asking for kind of at the top level, a knowledge, a ability to map as far as like understanding what's happening in Charlottesville and the different frameworks and power mapping to help us understand how to dismantle this on an ongoing basis. Understanding that these two rallies are indicative of a larger problem in our city, and we would like help understanding, framing that, and the visibility to have the resources to dismantle some of the, of course, residuals of white supremacy.
Yeah, that is so right on. I think that like, keeping that too, we have these rallies and we have these like points of convergence, but also being like recognizing that this is a thing that happens every single day, and locating it in your community is so super, super important.
Yeah, so people can come if they can bring their bodies and, link into what organization you're that's going to be protesting. So you can get resources around like housing. We need LOs at the J8. We realized quickly that we did not have enough legal observers. And so we actively need that. We need court support. We need people manning phones. We need resources, right? We, of course, a lot of the organizations have PayPal and Amazon wish lists. And so, link in what you can help us be ready for that day on ground and continuing forward. We need people. We specifically needed more people. I know this was an ask the other day to come and just observe, which is a little bit different from a legal observer, just to kind of keep a really tight chronicle timeline. I mean, we just need so much that it's like I could really ramble on for like 25 minutes about what we need. But
yeah, I feel like an important thing is that it was kind of mentioned there that there's a lot of different roles that need to be filled, and a lot of different ways that people can show up. But foremost, people just need to show up, and it was so important on J8 for the amount of people that came and completely outshining the Klan in that way. But it's going to be a different turnout on the other side next time, and it really does matter to counter it in that way. But another thing is that regardless of who's being confronted in the parks, who's being confronted on the right, the police are going to be there either way. And what they showed us on J8 was a very violent and disorganized reaction. And so we don't know what that's going to look like necessarily on A12, but what it took certainly on J8 was a lot of attention from medics. And so we have self-organized street medics that were working on J8 and plan to be out there A12 as well. But EMS, wasn't responding when there were serious injuries happening beyond just being exposed to tear gas. And it was crucial that people were out there that day giving that aid, including people giving mental health assistance when folks were experiencing trauma. And so we're really hoping that in future in A12, we'll be able to provide an even better and more organized response on the medic front. But that is one thing that certainly could always use financial support as well. And so there should be more accessible ways to donate coming forth pretty soon on that. Nice.
Is there anything else you would like folks to keep in mind who are planning to come, like how to interact with, the infrastructure of Charlottesville, if there's an opinion on that, or, anything else that we didn't get to?
I mean, I would say if people are coming in to just listen to the work and the voices of the, POC groups and Black people and white allies on the ground. That's really, really huge as far as being here.
Yeah, I back that 100%. The right is, coming to Charlottesville to use it as their playground. And, all of us opposed need to treat it with respect, treat Charlottesville and its people with respect.
Definitely. Yeah, I echo that. I back that also 100%. Is there a timeline of events that for A12 that people should keep in mind?
I haven't seen one as of yet.
I mean, we do know that the Unite the Right rally itself is slated to begin at noon that day. And so there's a list of speakers, but as far as anything else that they've publicized, there's no greater timeline. And I don't think there's anything yet that has been published, but I think that probably by the time that this airs or a day after, there will be more explicit information available in a call to action.
And I heard that the permit is supposed to be legal for 4 hours, so that's quite a bit longer than the last rally. And so we are preparing for a longer action at this point. So that's all we know and what we're working on right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I could imagine that with the permit, I mean, I heard the KKK on J8 left the rally early because of opposition and stuff, and I could imagine that things will go down a bit differently on A12 just because of the number of people who are coming in support of the right.
Yeah, and they've been calling and saying it's going to be, they're trying to bring in around 1,000 people, so it's going to be quite the size.
Yeah, that's all super, super good things to keep in mind. Those are all the questions that I have. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add as part of this interview?
Please come.
Yeah.
All right?
Yes, definitely. Enjoy the beautiful Virginia countryside while you're here.
Excellent.
Yeah, right?
Hell yeah. Hey, y'all, thank you so much for coming onto The Final Straw and for all that information and context. It was super interesting for me to talk to y'all about this, and stay safe out there. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
of course.
You.
Anytime.
stop the fight. We were all young together, stayed away forever. We all swam to the monster beat and we will never stop the fight.
From the studios of WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, and I'm Bursts of Goodness. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions or suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net. Also, if you're interested in rebroadcasting any episode or segment, you're free to do so. Just send us an email and let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw, care of Asheville FM, 864 Haywood Road, Asheville, North Carolina, 28806. The show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned cooperative in Asheville specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a sample of Firestorm's catalog of books and zines, plus a full calendar of events on their website, firestorm.coop.